Right now, on to the point. Outrage over a serial child molester granted parole.
He was so violent that he was sentenced to 3 life terms behind bars.
Tonight, the new effort's underway to change a state law allowing release. A fight underway tonight after a local DACA recipient is removed from the country, while local leaders are calling on others to speak up. And the race for California's next governor.
We have to return California to what I grew up with.
In our series of candidate interviews, what Javier Becerra says he'd bring to the job. Tonight, a program that allows some people convicted of sexually violent crimes to get out of prison early is facing heavy scrutiny. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Alex Bell, and the criticism continues after news that a serial child molester from Sacramento County has been granted parole. ABC 10's Becca Habegger shows us the efforts that are underway to make changes.
Hey, Alex, on Monday, we brought you the story of outrage over David Allen Funston. He's a Sacramento man convicted of sexually molesting multiple children in the 90s, and how California's Board of Parole hearings is granting him parole through something called the Elderly Parole Program. We took a look at how that program started, who's eligible for it, and the lawmakers working to change it.
What in the hell is going on in California?
That was Sacramento County Sheriff Jim Cooper on Monday at a news conference where he sounded the alarm about David Allen Funston, a Sacramento area man convicted of kidnapping and raping children in the 90s.
Judge in Sacramento described him, and I'll say this, as the monster parents fear most.
He says a judge sentenced Funston in 1999 to 20 years and 8 months in prison, as well as 3 consecutive sentences of 25 years to life. But the California Board of Parole hearings just granted him parole. That's because a law passed in 2017 established the Elderly Parole Program, allowing inmates who are at least 60 years old and have served at least 25 years of their time to become eligible for parole. A 2020 law relaxed eligibility, lowering the Elderly Parole Program age to 50 and time served to 20 years. Funston, who is 64 and has served nearly 27 years, would be eligible under either set of guidelines.
I think most reasonable Californians would argue that 50 is not elderly, and especially in the case of these types of criminals that have the ability to commit these crimes again, regardless of their age.
Republican State Senator Brian Jones has been leading the charge in recent years to make it harder or even impossible for violent offenders, especially sexually violent ones, to gain elderly parole. Last September, a Board of Parole hearings panel granted Funston elderly parole. In January, Governor Newsom requested a review of that decision, and just last week, the full board affirmed the panel's decision.
He was sentenced in such a way originally that he was never going to get out of prison.
But Jones says the Elderly Parole Program derailed that. It's why he introduced legislation last year to make people convicted of certain sex crimes totally ineligible for elderly parole. That bill died in committee. He's now working with fellow Republican Senator Roger Nilo on similar legislation.
My preference would be for them to comply with their original sentence and never be released.
And Republican Assemblymember Josh Hoover has also introduced legislation this year to keep people like Funston, he says, behind bars.
He came from my district. He victimized children in my district.
Under current law, the governor only has the authority to overturn a Board of Parole hearings decision in a murder case. Hoover's bill would expand that authority to overturn parole decisions in cases involving any violent felony, including certain sexually violent crimes.
Let's say that the governor himself, if he opposes the release of an individual, can actually step up and stop that from happening. We hope the governor will join us in supporting this effort.
For his part, the governor's office posted on X Tuesday that he opposes Funston's parole, had asked the board to review that decision, and has no authority to reverse this independent decision per state law.
We reached out to Funston's attorney. She tells us there is no precedent she's aware of where the board can review the full board decision again after members already reviewed and affirmed the decision. Alex.
All right, Becca, thank you. Well, tonight, Sacramento leaders and family members are calling for the return of a Natomas mother and DACA recipient who was deported to Mexico just last week. Now, yesterday, we brought you Maria de Jesus Estrada Juarez's story in her own words. She says that she was in the process of becoming a lawful permanent resident when she was handcuffed and deported the following day. Now, city officials are publicly standing behind her, calling her deportation a broken promise by the federal government treatment to immigrants who followed the law. Now, Sacramento Vice Mayor Karina Talamantes also says the mother works for a hotel that is under contract with the city of Sacramento to provide services to homeless people. She says Estrada Juarez has no criminal background and has done everything by the book.
People are scared to speak up, but we do need people to continue coming forward so that we have evidence of it happening. So that Assemblywoman Crowell and Senator Padilla and Senator Schiff can use these as examples of what's wrong in our country.
Talamantes says that she knows of at least 3 other DACA recipients who have also been deported. The Department of Homeland Security defends its actions, telling ABC 10 in a statement that Estrada Juarez received full due process and was previously issued a final order of removal from a judge back in 1998 and was removed from the United States shortly after. She illegally re-entered the U.S., a felony, saying that the final order of removal was reinstated when she was arrested last week. Well, tonight, the state's DMV is responding to reports about the CHP testing commercial truck drivers' English skills. And it comes as the federal government has been trying to crack down on commercial driver licenses and withholding funding from California over this exact issue. The DMV tells ABC 10 in part, consistent with California and federal law and national safety standards, the California Highway Patrol enforces the ELP requirement for commercial drivers, adding that the CHP refers commercial driver license holders who do not pass their roadside examination to DMV for further action. They say, quote, commercial drivers are an important part of our economy. Our supply chains don't move and our communities don't stay connected without them. DMV will continue to work with CHP to reinforce ELP requirements and keep the motoring public safe, end quote. And it is still not clear yet what this means for federal funding, but we are following this very, very closely. All right, still a lot of news to get to. Right after the break, the race for California's governor and our series of interviews with some top candidates. Tonight, what Javier Becerra says that he would bring to the job. Plus, following a week without power, why there's some good news for people in the Sierra.
We're running above normal right now and will continue to do so as we head into the weekend. I've got spring-like 70s through Saturday and next week. We've got to look at the forecast after the break.
But first, another headlines tonight. The FBI searched the Los Angeles Unified School District's headquarters today, along with the superintendent's home. They say it's part of a federal investigation. The LA Times reports it appears to be in connection to a company that developed an AI chatbot for the school system. A third location in Florida was also searched. The Trump administration is hitting Iran with new sanctions. The U.S. Treasury Department said the latest round of sanctions targets more than 30 individuals, companies, and vessels. The department says they all have ties to illicit Iranian oil sales and the country's ballistic missile production. The actions come as the Trump administration increases military pressure on Tehran to accept a new nuclear deal. And developing news in Cuba tonight, Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the U.S. is trying to independently verify facts and will brief lawmakers following a deadly shooting near the Cuban coast. Cuba says its Coast Guard killed 4 people and injured 6 others after they say a speedboat from Florida opened fire on their Coast Guard. Officials there say it happened roughly 1 mile off of Cuba's north coast. Well, a little bit of good news for some folks, at least, following damage and power outages in the foothills and Sierra in last week's storm. Tonight, PG&E says they have now restored power to 99% of customers impacted in the Sierra division, but outages do remain as they are still trying to get power back for more than 1,800 customers out in Amador County and more than 3,000 in Calaveras County. Let's get a check of your forecast with meteorologist Brendan Minchev. It was actually a beautiful day, nice warm, but a little bit of cloud coverage from what I saw.
Yeah, quite a bit of cloud coverage for most of the day, for most of the valley. Now lower in the valley, somewhere, a little closer to Modesto, had a little bit more sunshine today. Temperatures were a little warmer in the San Joaquin Valley than they were in the Sacramento metro area and in the upper Sacramento Valley. It's also humid. Relative humidity values all afternoon have been between about 75 and 95%. So, yeah, you probably felt that humidity if you spent a few minutes outside today. Like I said, temperatures were warmer south of the capital city. 72 in Stockton, 72 in Modesto, 67 in Sacramento, 59 in Placerville, 48 in Truckee, 51 in Tahoe this afternoon, 64 right now in Sacramento, Stockton, and 66 in Modesto, 50s in the foothills, 30s and 40s up in the high country. And as we look towards downtown, overcast, very similar to where we were 24 hours ago. There is no wind out there right now. Because of the cloud coverage, which will stick around as we go into the overnight, temperatures are not going to drop quickly, although they will drop. We're going to be in those low to middle 50s as we start off Thursday morning. We're also going to be looking at some fog through Thursday morning. Not necessarily looking at a lot of dense fog per se, but some widespread fog. Remember, dense fog would be visibility with a quarter mile or less. We're looking at a lot of visibilities around half a mile. So still pretty thick, still something to be mindful of as you go about your Thursday morning commute. But maybe we will not see a dense fog advisory there because it just doesn't seem like we're quite meeting that threshold for dense fog. Again, doesn't mean there won't be fog, just means it will not be some of the thickest fog that we've ever seen here in Northern California. Thursday morning in those low to mid 50s with that foggy start. Thursday afternoon, especially if we get that sun going, we're going to be in those low 70s in the valley. Very mild temperatures for this time of year. Clouds through the overnight, then a little bit of fog through the morning hours, and as all that clears, we'll have a mix of sun and clouds through the afternoon. The warmer temperatures and the stable weather pattern because high pressure building in over the next few days, and this is going to continue as we go into the start of March. So likely warmer and likely drier over the next 6 to 10 days in California. No more rain icons over the next 10 days. Temperatures very spring-like, a lot of days in the 70s.
I can get behind that, Brendan. Thank you so much. All right, stick with me because right after the break, the race for California's next governor and my one-on-one interviews with the leading candidates. Tonight, what Javier Becerra says he would do if he were to be elected. And we are honoring Black History Month, the group of Black singers whose history is not being forgotten. All right, this June, Californians will head to the polls to help decide who could become the state's next governor. While the final decision comes in November, for now, 9 leading Democratic hopefuls and several Republicans are in the race. And to help you get to know them just a little bit better and what they say they would bring to the job, I sat down with the candidates at this past weekend's Democratic convention, and I will also do the same with the Republican Party. To keep things fair, I drew the names at random for these interviews. Tonight, meet Javier Becerra. For the people that are meeting you for the first time, why are you deciding to run for governor?
Alex, we have to return California to what I grew up with, where a construction worker with a 6th grade education and a clerical worker who didn't come to this country till she married my dad when she was 18 could actually send the 3 sisters I had and myself to college or the military. They could actually buy a house, a small house, and then they could retire, not in Utah or Idaho or Arizona, but here in California. We need that back. And I want young families to believe that with me as governor, that's what they'll have.
If elected, what are your top 3 priorities your first year in office?
Well, one has to be more housing. We have to build more housing. Everyone is saying that because it's absolutely true. We have to make it more affordable to live in California. 2, I believe healthcare is indispensable. And just because we have the man-made disasters coming from Washington, D.C., where Donald Trump is cutting access to healthcare through Medi-Cal, through the Affordable Care Act, we're not going backwards. We're going to continue to move forward to give people access to care at affordable prices. And then 3, I'm the first in my family to have a college education. I'm going to make sure that we continue to improve K through 12. And we start doing preschool because we have to get kids ready to learn and ready to lead.
California spends billions addressing homelessness, yet this still remains a major problem in our state. What would you do differently to address homelessness?
First thing is accountability, making sure that the monies that we send from the state to our cities and our counties shows results. Because I think too often and more, Californians don't believe we're getting results for the money we're putting into homelessness. Secondly, we'll try to work with those cities and counties, but it won't just be on housing, it'll also be on mental health. It'll be on social services because a lot of these folks are homeless, not just because they lost their shelter from before or they lost their job, but because mentally, physically, they weren't capable of keeping that job and keeping that home. The third thing I will do, and has less to do with the homelessness issue directly, is on my watch as governor, if you have shelter, a roof over your head, I want to guarantee you that you're not going to lose it if you're a working Californian. If you work hard, you have a roof over your head, but you're barely making ends meet, you're paycheck to paycheck, I'd rather make sure that we are investing in you to keep you housed than see you go on the streets and then have to pull you off the streets to get you housed because it costs so much more money to pull someone off the streets and get them housed than keeping someone who is in a home in that place.
Do you think that California has gone too far not far enough or struck the right balance on criminal justice reform?
It really depends on what the areas are. We were at one point with 3 strikes laws going way too far. At the same time, if you get too lenient, then you make it impossible to be able to try to get people back on the right path. What I think we have to do is take a look at Prop 36, for example. Prop 36 says we want to make sure we're tough on people who are committing crime, but we also want to make sure that we can get them off the path of committing crime. If we don't provide the services that you need, whether it's mental health, drug addiction services, then you're going to keep them on that path. So let's do what we know works. Provide people with the services that let them rehabilitate and get on the right path. That way we can keep people out of prison and in a job.
And we are going to keep these candidate profiles coming at 6:30, giving you a closer look at the top Democratic candidates in the race. And tomorrow I sit down with Katie Porter, and we are also working to sit down with the Republican candidates as we continue our coverage of the race for California's next governor. Coming up, honoring Black History Month, we head to a historic hidden community of Black singers in Woodland, how their story is not being forgotten. Tonight, a powerful discovery inside Woodland's Opera House is rewriting what we thought we knew about Black history in Northern California. A group of African-American performers once stood on that very stage, building community just decades after slavery. Now, as we mark Black History Month, UC Davis students are racing to make sure that their story is never forgotten. ABC 10's Carolina Estrada has the story.
More than 120 years ago, a group of Black singers stood right here, performing for an interracial audience in a state that had once allowed slavery. These faces, frozen in time from 1903, belong to the Yolo Singing Club, a group of African-American performers whose voices once filled this same stage. Their story might have stayed hidden, if not for UC Davis graduate students like Serena Crawford.
When we talk about this story, it's not that we discovered it, it's that we're illuminating it. People have been trying to tell this story. The elders have been trying to get it out for dozens of years.
Digging through county archives, property records, and family histories, Crawford and her classmates uncovered something powerful. A thriving Black community in 19th century Woodland, made up of people once enslaved who built new lives in California.
What really stands out is the fact of their resilience and their ability to create opportunities for themselves in a place that they were brought enslaved.
California entered the Union as a free state in 1850, but enslaved people were still brought here.
You can see the history all over the Opera House, but it's rare to think of a history where you see in the early 1900s a group of Black singers singing to an interracial audience and having, acclaim in the newspapers.
And in Yolo County, family-built homes and churches, and even a singing club that took the stage at the Opera House.
The photograph is what started this journey.
For Professor Cecilia Su, the journey began with a single photograph.
Their ancestors came enslaved, but they were able to live lives just like any of us.
The Yolo Singing Club performed here more than 120 years ago, filling this hall with music at a time when opportunity was anything but guaranteed.
When we think about African American history and the history of the Civil War and Reconstruction era, it tends to be a north-south history, but indeed, California was very much part of that history, and so illuminating this particular story of this family helps us to understand all of those different layers.
Now, the research is reaching beyond the exhibit. UC Davis students created classroom lessons and digital materials, teaching local elementary students about figures like Mary Windrow, an enslaved mother who found freedom and family here in Yolo County.
You can see them realizing, wow, this history that you're talking about, it took place in a place that we are familiar with.
What this tells us is stories of real life people, and it can be a part of how we can see how far we've grown, but also see how similar we still are to that past.
In Yolo County, Carolina Estrada, ABC 10.
And to find more Black History Month stories on the ABC 10 TV streaming app, you can download that app straight to your TV for free. As always, thank you so much for watching and for always inviting us into your home. If you have something you think we should be looking into, you can always email us at tothepoint@abc10.com. And I know I have been out for a few days. I went on vacation, then I was in the field reporting. So I just want to say again, thank you to everyone who has reached out, like Patrick. He sent me a very nice note. I just want to say that those moments really mean a lot to me, and thank you so much. But I'm officially back, and I will see you guys tomorrow.